Okay, so the next step in restoring this Kyosho Lazer ZXS Evolution is to tear it apart and figure out if anything's broken or missing, and also have, pile up the pieces that I want to get reproduced. Okay, so I guess the first thing to point out is as I was tearing the car down, and I have little bins here where I tried to organize everything, it does make it much more clear what kind of rough shape this car was in. Apparently, whoever the previous owner was, they probably didn't maintain it in the capacity that this particular car deserved, considering how rare it is. So, there's nothing that's like broken. Well, I shouldn't say that. Like, a couple of things are chipped, but like the universal joints are okay. The diff pulleys are okay. The center lay shaft is okay. Like the main pieces are fine. Although, the rear diff is crunchy, so, they probably abused that too much, didn't set it up correctly. There's some missing pieces, like this bottom kingpin here to this caster block, little things like that. A couple of things are actually, I suppose, problematic. So, like the lower deck here, at the very front of the lower deck, you see that hole on the upper right. There's not a whole lot of material around that hole, and that is kind of broken. But this is one of the parts I'm going to be sending out for reproduction, so I'm not too worried about this. The rear tower, there's some delamination here. You can see a little crack there of this upper portion of the tower. Little things like that. The car's really dirty, so better to work with gloves on this thing. Okay, so what's next? The next thing is to sort out all these parts. So there are plate parts and there are molded parts. All the plate parts, so the lower deck, the upper deck, the rear tower, the front tower. This is for the gearbox. The rear gearbox actually has carbon fiber plates to define the sides, so there's all of that. Plus the battery straps, and these are the front and rear inner hinge pin mounts for the chassis. I want to send all of these out to my friend Brian, who can CAD this all up and reproduce all of it in carbon fiber. Although these are metal parts, it's a flat plate, so you can make this out of carbon fiber, and what's great about this is you can redesign it to change the whole arrangement. So, like with modern four-wheel drive buggies, you'll have little, I forget what they call them, like pillow inserts to the inner hinge pin mounts, and you could change the arm sweep, the kick up, or the anti-squat, or the toe in. So imagine having parts for this car where you can do the same thing with these plates. Whether to make that all as a single part, which would be a little tricky because the holes wouldn't move really that far over. So you'd probably have to have several of these plate parts with these holes arranged in slightly different configurations to get whatever geometry you're looking for. For now, I think we'll just do the defaults, the stock setup here. But reproducing them does give you the option, if you will, of having some redesign or tunability there. For the towers, so for the front tower, what I want to do is add another set of holes for the shock mounting position to the bottom here, another bottom row, because with the shocks mounted on this car, using any of these holes, the only way to get full droop is to move the bottom shock to the inside hole on the arm, to this hole here. But that does limit your combination of shock geometry and droop. It would be nice to be able to lay the shocks down without compromising droop, and one way to do that is to have some adjustment on the tower so you can move the shock down while also laying it down like this, so you can maintain your droop while changing the shock angle. The other thing is the camber link mounting holes. There's 3 here, so you can adjust camber gain, but there's no roll center adjustment. So I'm going to want to add some holes below and or above, so you have a nice little matrix here for adjustment on the front. And to supplement that, there's another piece, oh boy, where'd it go? Here, Okay, this mounts on the back side of the front gearbox for the upper arm. This upper arm mounts in between this guy and this front tower. So any holes that you put for the inner camber link, if you will, over here, you have to replicate the same thing on this part here. Okay, so that's one component of the redesign I would like to do. And then for the rear tower, something similar, you know, adding more camber link adjustment holes on the rear here. So a couple below, a couple above. And then, you know, maybe some extra holes here. So like maybe add a little bit more material to the bottom of the tower and add some more holes down here. Maybe another hole on the inside. You know, give the user more tuning options. Let's see. What else could be, let's say, modified or redesigned? Really not much to modify on the upper deck. The lower deck, if anything, I mean, I'd be tempted to say, you know, let's add some more material around these holes here. And maybe that would work. I'd have to double check how, because this kick-up plate mounts like this. And then there's another plate. Oh boy, let me see if I got this right. Maybe I put it, did I put it in here? No, I did not. Okay. See, a lot of parts. Got to find it. Ah, here we go. Another plate. This goes right here like this. Okay. So maybe what we can do in the redesign is add more material around these holes here, assuming that it doesn't interfere with anything else as it mounts onto the chassis. So for instance, I think that's the rear gearbox. When the front gearbox half mounts like this, how does it mount? Like, oh, that's the top piece. See, it's all a mess. It's all a mess. This. Okay, so let's make sure we got the right part here. Might be this one. Yes, okay, so that would be the front, one of the front gearbox halves. So it looks like you could reasonably add a little bit more material here to strengthen that up. Okay, great, fine and good. Now, what else am I going to do? So that's for all of the plate parts, of which there are a bunch. So, you know, this will take a while. This is not a short-term project by any means. This is a long-term project, okay? The other pieces are the molded parts, right? Every single Lazer ZXS part is extremely difficult to find. So all of the parts that are unique to the car, so like the gearbox components, even the front bumper, the upper suspension arms, what else is there? I think the inside inner hinge pin mounts, these are also, I think, unique to the ZXS. I think there are maybe one or two other parts in here that I have. Oh, like the rear tower mount. This is a much smaller mount for the rear shock tower than you have on like the Lazer ZX or the ZXR. All of these I'm going to send to another person to CAD them up for 3D printing. So that way, you know, hopefully if someone wanted to build their own ZXS, they'd have a much larger source of parts for 3D printing, plus all the plate parts. I know Fiberlight does some of this, but I don't think they do all of it, and they don't have redesigned parts. So then the only thing you need is, like, you know, the drivetrain components and maybe a few other little bits to build out the gearbox, which is not something that I'm prepared to reproduce. But this should make it a lot easier for people to build their own sort of clone ZXS or ZXS Evolution, and also for people who actually want to run them to do so without fear of, you know, breaking original parts. They could just mount their 3D printed parts on it. The other thing I wanted to comment on is the lay shaft. I pointed out in the first video about how I wasn't completely sure if this was assembled correctly. Turns out that it was, thankfully. So it's not missing any parts, but what it does suggest is, you know, this one way here for this pulley, okay, it doesn't look like in the way that this is assembled that there's any friction plate here to drive binding in this one-way action. So you may recall on the prior Lazers, the ZX, the ZXR, and the ZXRR, this lay shaft is a little different, and there's a friction plate here which you can adjust with a nut on this side to adjust how much you want that one way to spin under full braking. This doesn't look like it offers that. It looks like it's a full one-way. So I do want to try to modify this a little bit to try to find a way to put a friction plate in here of some sort without interfering with this bearing here, obviously. So that way I can lock this one way, because I don't like having a one-way pulley. You know, when you're driving on dirt, that makes it really hard. If you're on AstroTurf, it's probably fine, but on dirt it sucks. So that's one thing I'm gonna have to figure out a creative solution for. But yeah, that's the status right now. This is gonna be, again, long-term project. It's not gonna happen overnight, but should be worth the wait. So thanks for watching.